Higher education in America is crushingly expensive. College tuition rates are rising far faster than family income is. Colleges are also politically monochromatic. Once in school, your kids will submit to brainwashing or they will suffer. When they come home, they may have learned to hate the values you raised them with, the ones you believe in. They may also be addicted to drugs and alcohol. So obviously the costs of college are extraordinarily high, but it's worth it, we tell ourselves, for the education. Education is key. Our kids need to learn. So the question is, are they learning? Well, several years ago, a pair of academic researchers decided to find out. They studied data from a group of more than 2,000 students enrolled in four-year colleges who've been tracked over a period of years. The book that resulted from all this research was called Academically Adrift: Limited Learning on College Campuses. Among its many findings, 45% of students, quote, did not demonstrate any significant improvement in learning over the first 2 years of college. Close to 40% didn't learn anything at all over 4 years. How did students learn so little? Well, many of them never really studied. 35% of students reported spending no more than 5 hours a week in academic preparation. Overall, the study found a 50% decline in the number of hours students spent studying compared to several decades ago. The average full-time college student now spends only 2.76 hours a day on all education-related activities, going to class, studying, all of it, and more than twice as much time shopping, eating, and partying. Multiply this by an entire country, and you wind up with a deeply ignorant population. There has been a consistent decline in adult literacy in America over the past 25 years, despite the fact that more kids than ever are going to college. Two separate studies by the National Assessment of Adult Literacy found that most college graduates fall below proficiency in verbal and quantitative literacy. The majority could not compete simple cognitive tasks like comparing the viewpoints in newspaper editorials or calculating the cost of food items in the grocery store. A 2005 study found that only 31% of college graduates could read and understand a complex book. 31%. Surveys of American college graduates show that they are far more ignorant than their counterparts in virtually every other developed nation. In some cases, college graduates in this country got the same test scores as high school graduates in other countries. As the Educational Testing Service put it, quote, a decade ago, the skill level of American adults was judged to be mediocre. Now it is below even that. This is a crisis. So you would think that colleges would respond by increasing academic rigor. But the opposite has happened. A survey of the top public universities in America found that only 9 schools required an economics course for graduation, for example. Only 5 required a survey course in American history. And as one researcher noted, despite lip service given to multiculturalism, fewer than half required even intermediate study of a foreign language. Meanwhile, the number of degrees awarded in women's and gender studies increased by more than 300% since 1990. College classes are getting flimsier. College graduates are getting dumber. But you would never know it from their grades, which are getting higher. In 1983, the average college GPA in this country was 2.8. It's now over 3.1. Grade inflation is everywhere, but it's most profound at private schools. At Wake Forest, for example, in North Carolina, the cumulative GPA for graduating seniors in 1988 was 2.84. In 2014, it was 3.4. Nationally, the most common grade given in college courses right now is an A. According to the New York Times, about 43% of all letter grades given are A's. Only about 10% are D's and F's. In other words, more students are failing, yet almost nobody fails. Kids know less, but their teachers assure them they know more. Colleges barely teach, yet every year they increase their fees. Try that in a private business. You might get indicted for fraud. Do it at an American university, and you get billions in taxpayer subsidies. Mark Roosevelt is the president of St. John's College in Santa Fe. St. John's is one of the only colleges in America that is still trying to provide a traditional liberal arts education centered on the study of great books. Mark Roosevelt joins us today. President Roosevelt, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I want to talk to you specifically because I think, this is not to promote your school, but I do think St. John's is different from most universities. To me, you've got a different vantage on this. Looking at the country, how has it happened that when more people are going to college than ever before, there is a consistent decline in adult literacy? How did that happen?
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing St. John's to join this conversation. We believe in conversation and civil discourse, which is another thing that, as you've pointed out, is unfortunately absent from many places.
Yes, I agree.
Wow. You noted that we were different, Mr. Carlson. We are so different. We may be the most rigorous college in America. Our freshmen must learn ancient Greek. Our seniors struggle with quantum physics. Along the way, they have to take calculus. They have to learn how to do differential equations, and they have to study Hegel and Kierkegaard and Karl Marx and Adam Smith. So we are sailing against almost every prevailing wind in American higher education. I do agree with a lot of what you said at the beginning, that there has been slippage in rigor, slippage in the demands academically made of students. And we think that is a mistake, and we have no intention of joining that particular parade in higher education.
Well, good for you. I wonder, though, what you make of this phenomenon. Maybe I'm misreading it, but as the outcomes decline, become less impressive, kids know less when they graduate, rigor declines. You would think colleges would say, we're turning out people who don't know very much. Only 30% can read a complex book. Maybe we want to teach them more. But the opposite seems to be happening. Why?
Well, I'm not sure that I know the answer to why. The movement towards allowing students to shape their own curriculum and to be able to determine their own education is part of it. A lack of expectations is another part of it. Again, not to return to St. John's, but that's what I know best. Our students read 200 books, and I mean 200 serious books over the course of their education. But, Mr. Carlson, in all honesty, we are for very few folks. I mean, we have about 800 students between our two campuses. And our students are very self-selecting. They know what they're getting into. They know how hard it's going to be. And, you know, that is a very serious challenge for a lot of students. And
so
most
maybe that's
colleges
it.
are not like that.
Well, so maybe you put your finger on it. What you're offering is a traditional liberal arts education that would have been familiar to a lot of well-educated Americans 100 years ago. Now you've got 800 students. So I guess the question is, what percentage of the American population is really suited for, interested in, should participate in a liberal arts education?
Well, you know, I honestly believe that there ought to be a lot of diversity in our educational offerings. You've talked in the previous shows about career preparation, and there is a place for that. There's a place for people who want to get trained to do a job, even though we also know from colleges that only about 20% of students will actually work in something that they majored in. As you may know, Mr. Carlson, we don't have majors at St. John's. We don't think that life breaks down into majors. So again, we're just very different. So, you know, the liberal arts education can be described in very different things in very different places. At St. John's, it's an all-required curriculum. Everybody's taking all of the same courses, and they're all of equal rigor and equal demands. They're in very small classes. You know, an average of about 15 students in a class, so there's no place for them to hide. So the rigor is very real.
And I hope it stays that way. Mark Roosevelt, thanks a lot for joining us. I appreciate it. Over the past month, we have laid out many of the ways that college is failing American students and their parents and the government and our society more broadly. Every year it costs far more to go to college than it did in the previous generation. Those costs are rising far faster than inflation. Most students need tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans to go to college. And yet what they learn there is not impressive. The classes themselves are teaching less than ever, unless it's extremist political ideology. But even if college is failing, most students feel they have no choice but to go. There just aren't options. Some people are working assiduously to change that. Isaac Morehouse is the founder and CEO of Praxis. It's a startup that promotes apprenticeships as alternatives to college degrees, and he joins us now. Isaac, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
This is a tough pitch. We spent the last month working on this and talking to a lot of people who go to college and looking at it from all angles. And one thing you hear from almost everyone who's in college or planning to go is that I know it's too expensive, and I know I'm not going to learn much, and there are other downsides, but I don't have a choice. So how do you make the pitch to sort of high aptitude, middle class kids who could go to a four-year college? What do you tell them to convince them not to?
Yeah, and those are exactly the type of people that we work with. Look, the good news is the degree is dead. I'm not overstating that. It is a myth that you need a degree to start a career. Now, unless you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, or heaven forbid, a bureaucrat or a professor, you don't need a degree. And the best and brightest are realizing this, and they're getting started in their career now. And if you're sitting in the classroom, you're not giving yourself you're going to get left behind, frankly. So, we can point to the hundreds of people that we've worked with, and we've placed them in apprenticeships, and they've gone on to get great jobs. Many of those jobs, by the way, if you just look at a job posting, they will say degree required. But it's actually not true. Employers just want to know that you're going to create value for them. And there are so many ways that you can prove that better than just that dead piece of paper.
One of the things employers want is an assurance that someone has vetted you and that you're smart and that you kind of have your act together, that you have high aptitude but also the capacity for achievement. Without a degree, how do you convince them of that?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. A friend of mine who is a CEO, I just saw a tweet of his recently. He did a little poll, and he said, this is not scientific, but this is very much in line with the hundreds of CEOs and hiring managers I've talked with. He said, if you only knew this about someone, who would you rather hire? Someone who'd run a marathon or someone with a degree? 85% said the person who had run a marathon. That's just one example, but that's one of those things that, it signals a lot of things at once. So look, you can go out and create projects and say, hey, I built this, I did this. You can start offering to do some projects, do some work for free. You can go and build up kind of a portfolio that showcases some of your skills and interests. Figure out what you're interested in, build some actual skills, and start working on things. And if you just think about for a minute, zoom out. If you were to enroll in college in the fall, 3 years from now, you'd still be in the classroom. If you were to go and this fall and do something like Praxis or something where you're going out, you're getting some work experience, you're building a body of work, in 3 years, you're going to have 3 years of professional experience under your belt. You're going to have so much more to leverage into a great job, a great career.
That's absolutely right. And there's a huge lobby of people whose job it is to lie to you and convince you otherwise, but it is a lie. So in the minute we have left, give us the pitch for Praxis. I'm an 18-year-old. I have decent grades, fine scores. I could get into a solid 4-year college. Instead, I go to Praxis, and what happens then?
Yeah, so we're all about launching careers. And if you don't want that, if you want a debt-fueled drinking party that your parents will be proud of, go to college by all means. Yeah. If you want to launch your career, you're going to need more than that. You're going to have to quit playing around and get out and do some real work. And we have a boot camp, a professional boot camp, where we put you through just really identifying your skills and doing real projects and things, as I mentioned, to kind of signal, to prove, hey, I built this, I can do this. And then we place you with startups where you're doing a paid 6-month apprenticeship on site, and you're learning from entrepreneurs, and you walk away at the end of the program. Almost all of our grads, 96% of them, get a full-time job at the end. So, I mean, that's what we do at Praxis, and I think it's just the beginning of this revolution.